What's up, everybody? Michael Walsh here. So, bit of a cozier video today, change of location. It is nearly 20 degrees below zero outside, so I am not filming in my garage today. However, I've still got you covered. We're going to do a main card breakdown, and I'm going to toss in Umar versus Figgy, because that fight rules. And starting with that one, like everyone else, I'm going with Umar, okay? Figueiredo, he was already past his prime by the time he went up to bantamweight. Like, he aged out of his prime in the four fights with Moreno. Clearly had a tough time making weight. Maybe thought he would just never win the title. Maybe thought he just, Figueiredo had his number by the end of it. But in any case, he moves up to bantamweight. He has good success, puts together those three very good wins before running into Peter Yan and putting on a fantastic performance. Great fight. Yan clearly wins it, but it's somewhat analogous to like Josh Burnett and Daniel Cormier. Good fight, competitive, but one guy clearly wins. Since then, though, he's not looked fantastic. Like, I think he was already past his prime, like I said, when he went up. But that fight with Corey Sandhagen was very worrying because Figueiredo, he's always had great grappling. He's a legit submission threat. Yes, he makes some, chaotic decisions out there. It's the same on the ground as it is on the feet for him. But some of the choices he made against Sandhagen showed me just how far past his best years he actually is. Because, like, initially when people age out of their primes, what you see is their athleticism diminish. But typically, they have, like, a phase where they're still on top of their game in terms of their skills and their strategy. And sometimes they actually improve a little bit in those departments because they have to more and more rely on their skill and their experience instead of their physicality. So, like, I think of late stage Anderson Silva. I think of late stage Jim Miller, characters like that. But past a certain point, you often will see the skills actually start to drop off. You'll see the fight IQ start to drop off. Because what happens, I think, is that as you get older, the stress and the speed of the situation that happens when you're in a real fight, the adrenaline, all that stuff, the reliance on reflex, the reliance on muscle memory, that starts going away. And so it's most obvious and striking because, people's speed drops off, their reflexes drop off, they just don't see punches coming. But I think it can happen in the grappling too, because you will see stuff like we saw from Figueiredo versus Sandhagen, where just the basic decisions, just the basic choice to like keep going for leg locks when they're clearly not there, and when that's just like bad MMA meta at this point. The way Figueiredo was just going to that well over and over again, to me, that was just a very terrible sign as far as where he's at in his career. And yes, he won that fight since against, I believe it was Montel Jackson. Yes, that's fantastic. I compared it at the time to like a less good version of like what Kamaru did against Buckley, but nevertheless, like, Figueiredo is way past it at this point. As well he should be. I think he's in his late 30s right now, and to be in your late 30s at bantamweight when you're an undersized dude anyways, because he had a size and strength and power advantage at flyweight that did a lot of the heavy lifting for his success. And diehards of this channel, of which there's a couple, you probably know how much I love Figueiredo. Like, he's one of my favorite fighters. I think he is the second best flyweight in history behind Mighty Mouse. I think he's ahead of Pantoja. I think he's ahead of Moreno. But let's be real here. Like, even in his prime, bantamweight would be a little challenging for him because, yes, his power carried over to some degree, just like how he did against like Rob Font and Cheeto. But, when it comes to the grappling, he was always going to be at a disadvantage. And for someone like Umar, that's a problem. Like, Umar is a big bantamweight. Umar's grappling is exceptional. He's vulnerable on the feet. Like I could see there is a path to victory for even this version of Figueiredo. He could catch him. And I kind of expect him to sting him at least. I kind of expect Figueiredo to land at least a strike that has some visible effect on Umar. I do expect that to happen. But I don't expect it to lead to a finish, and I don't expect it to prevent Umar from like winning a comfortable decision, which is what I think will happen. Because it's only 3 rounds. I'm not convinced Umar will like get a submission or finish him with ground and pound. 3 rounds isn't that long for Figueiredo to sort of like preserve his gas tank at least enough to survive. So that's what I think will happen. I agree with what other people have said, that this is kind of a silly booking. I think it should be Sean versus Umar, and it should be Song versus Figgy, but this is what we got. I think the Song O'Malley fight is a more appropriate booking than this one is. This feels like just sort of, let's use up what's left of Figgy. Let's get another win on Umar's record. Like, that's what this feels like to me. But I'm still excited to see it because, I'm invested in where Umar goes from here. We'll see if he looks better than his previous performance because Batista gave him a little bit more trouble than we were expecting. And, fingers crossed, if Figgy can pull it out, if he can get a knockout, or even if he can just get, like, a dominant round where he drops him and lands some ground and pound and goes for a guillotine that's, like, kind of threatening, but Umar eventually slips out, and then Umar wins the other 2 rounds. Even just a moral victory like that would feel good. So I'm invested. But moving on to the actual main card, Arnold Allen versus John Silva. I had to sit and think about this one for a while because Arnold Allen is, like, a really weird case. Because he went on a 10-fight win streak when he came to the UFC. Like, that's what Islam did. I mean, and his 10-fight win streak, Allen's, I would argue, was better than Islam's was at lightweight. But instead of giving him the title shot, they gave him to Max Holloway, and Max beat him. Like, Max, for a lot of Volk's reign, Max was kind of relegated to, like, the position Nogueira was relative to Fedor, where it's like, you're clearly the second best guy, but you have no shot against the champ. And you're actually going to do some of the champ's dirty work by, like, picking off potential contenders so that they won't actually fight him ever. Like, if Nogueira weren't around, Fedor might have fought Verdum earlier. Fedor might have fought Karatanov. Fedor might have fought Josh Barnett at a point. I mean, Barnett beat Nogueira the first time, but, like, Nogueira won the rematch. Like, Cro Cop did more of the heavy lifting, keeping Josh out of the picture. But, like, in any case, that was sort of what Max was to Volkanovski, and he derailed Arnold Allen. But nevertheless, Allen did put together a goddamn 10-fight win streak in the featherweight division, and that is nuts, and it speaks to his skills and his abilities. He's very strong, too. I've watched some of his weightlifting videos. His dad is like a competitive strongman in England, and there's videos of Allen lifting some real weight, especially for a guy his size. So, but my read on him as a fighter and as far as, like, his total package, as far as his skill set, I'm just not in love with it because he's an all-rounder, but he's not much of a finishing threat. Like, he's got good striking. He's got decent defense. He's got really good anti-wrestling. He showed that against Evloev. He's got some submission threat, like when he submitted Masvidal. Like, that was cool. That ninja choke was sneaky. But in general, his fights go the distance. He's not that dangerous of a striker. He doesn't actually shoot a lot of takedowns. He doesn't get people down that often. He's not like a massive submission threat. And while on the one hand, I'm almost tempted to say that he's like a tier above John Silva, because I'm at this point in time, I'm especially not like convinced of Silva's potential as far as like becoming a champion or anything. And I think he might be like one level below, whereas Allen is like more approaching a top contender in terms of quality. Nevertheless, the fact that Allen is just not very dangerous, the fact that he's like almost certainly going to win by decision if he does win, and the fact that he doesn't actually go for that many takedowns, I think that could be pretty bad against John Silva. Like, Silva's, it looked bad that Silva got like so thoroughly fucked up on the ground against Lopez. I get that, but in general, Silva has shown decent grappling and decent takedown defense. And should Allen get him down briefly, like, he's just not going to get the sort of dominant position and then initiate the sort of offense that Diego Lopez did. So I think this fight's going to mostly be on the feet. And yeah, Allen could stay safe enough and could win a decision, but I think more likely he's either going to get knocked out by Gene Silva, or Silva's going to win the round with like punctuated moments. It's going to be like Chito Vera did against Rob Font. It's going to be that sort of thing where it's like, Allen's moving around. He's, his defense is looking okay. He's outpointing Silva, but then Silva cracks him and drops him, or just horribly wobbles him or something like that. Just steals the round. And if he does that twice, he wins. So I'm leaning towards Silva. I'm picking him. Moving on to, I forget the order in the actual event, but we'll go with Waldo Cortez Acosta and Derek Lewis next. This one I'm iffy on. I have a gut feeling that it's going to be Derek Lewis, because I'm just not that impressed with Costa. Like, I know he's got a boxing background, and I know I know it shows up in his fights. Like he's basic, like he's mostly a 1-2, but he does subtle things that I like. Like he will vary the kind of jab he throws, and by that I mean, he'll throw kind of a light flicking jab. He'll throw just sort of a range finding jab. He'll throw a more stiff jolting jab where he really gets full extension, puts some pop into it, and he'll use it to disguise when the right hand's coming. Like when he beat Shamil, like Shamil was expecting the left and the right came, and that's good. And like that's probably the best thing I can say about Casa is that he'll vary the rhythm with both his right and left hands, and that's even if you got a simple pared down boxing game, like that's very valuable. But at the same time, his boxing game is basic. His right hand is often very sloppy. Like there's a reason Derek Lewis compared him to Roy Nelson, and that's not a fair comparison because Casa's boxing is better than Roy's, but like that right hand is sloppy. That right hand typically comes in an arcing, pawing sort of angle. And he's just not much more to him than that. And he's not that athletic, and he's not that big, and he doesn't have like a grappling game that's going to really threaten Derek Lewis. So like, I'm actually kind of liking Lewis's chances of just surviving and biding his time and doing the old Romero thing and just sort of conserving energy until he finds an opening. And he's the bigger guy. He's got reach. He hits harder. Like I'm kind of liking his chances of getting a late finish. So it might not be the most logical pick, but I my gut is really telling me Derek Lewis is going to do Derek Lewis shit. And it feels appropriate. Like I think he kind of knows, like first card on Paramount, main card, this feels like another opportunity for something like what he did against Volkov to happen. So, I'm not betting money on any of this stuff, so there's not a lot of consequences for me being wrong, but I'm going with Derek Lewis, okay? Moving on, Talia Silva versus Rose Namajunas. I'm going with Silva. Like, we can break this down stylistically, and I can talk about Silva's game, and, she maintains range pretty well. She's got good dexterity with her kicks, throws in combination decently well. Good takedown defense, showed that against Grasso. But this is mostly a momentum and where they are in their careers kind of pick, because Silva, she's on this great win streak. She's 7-0 in the division. And Rose is just, she's aging out. She's 33. She's in the wrong weight class. She's too small for flyweight. And she's a fucking head case. And she just, she has no direction in her career. Like, she doesn't even want to be champion, like, by her own words. And so it's like, how am I picking you over this surging younger contender? Of course I'm not going to. And, it's too bad for Rose because she is, skill for skill, probably the best female fighter there's ever been, frankly, because strawweight's the best division. It's where the best fighters are. And you sort of have a four queens situation where you've got her, you've got Joanna, you've got Weili Zhang, and you've got Jessica Andrade, and that's analogous to like the four kings in boxing, which were Durant, Hagler, Hearns, and Sugar Ray Leonard, not Robinson. And she is kind of the Sugar Ray to the four queens that Sugar Ray was to the four kings. Like, she's the only one of the three that beat each of the other three. So, it's kind of a shame that someone who was once in that position has sort of fallen into this weird soup of just being like, again, in the wrong weight class, getting older, and just having no sense of where she's supposed to go. And that is just because she's a head case. So I can't pick her to beat a contender like Silva. So I'm not going to. Moving on. Co-main event. Sean O'Malley versus Song Yadong is interesting to me because Song Yadong, I was really reflecting on it, like what kind of fighter he strikes me as. Because he's good. He's young enough. He's strong. He's durable. He's got good takedown defense, as you'd expect from someone who trains a team alpha male. Good, decent takedowns himself. Kind of good all-around kickboxing game. But since he's not that offensively potent as far as his grappling, like again, I said he's got okay wrestling, but he's not reliably like going to win rounds by controlling you. He's not a submission threat. He's not like a terrifying ground and pound threat. And on the feet, he's got some finishes, but like, he's not that potent of a striker, and he's kind of flat-footed. He really is the Marvin Vettori of bantamweight. Like, that's what he is. And he's much better than Marvin Vettori because it's bantamweight, not middleweight. But that's his archetype. And against Sean O'Malley, who's going to have the reach, who's going to have the speed, who's much lighter on his feet, who's the craftier striker, who hits way harder. I'm picking Sean O'Malley all day. And I know some people are picking against him because he said he'll retire if he loses. That, to me, like, I've seen him talk about that. I saw the interview with Guru. To me, that doesn't sound like a bad thing. Like, that, I get it, where it's like, oh, as soon as they talk about retirement, they got one foot out the door. That's not how it read to me. Like, the way he was speaking about it, to me, it felt more like he just knew, like, I'm supposed to be at a certain level. I refuse to be at a lower level. Like, I'll fucking retire if I lose to this guy. Like, there was more of like a drive and an urgency. It reminded me of when Justin Gaethje fought James Vick. I think was it James Vick? The tall guy he fought. I forget his name. But Gaethje had come to the UFC. He'd beaten Michael Johnson, but then he went on a 2-fight losing streak, both knockouts against Eddie Alvarez and Dustin Poirier. And then he fought Vick. And Vick was this kind of up-and-comer. He had some skills. He was 9-1 in his last 10. But, you know, as Gaethje showed, and as was showed, you know, in subsequent fights of Vick's, he wasn't on that level. He wasn't an actual top contender. And there was some shit talking before the fight. Gaethje said something similar to what Sugar Sean said. And I can't remember what it was exactly, but it was to the effect of, like, if I lose to this guy, I'll fucking retire. And what happened? Gaethje came out, knocked him out in a round. You know, so I think it was that sort of energy. It was a more of a competitive, vindictive energy, and less of a, oh, I don't know if I want to fight anymore, I'm going to retire energy. And that's kind of how Sean came off to me. So to me, that's not worrying. I'm not like hearing that and being like, ooh, like I got to reconsider my pick. Instead, I'm just going with the fact that stylistically, I think the song is there for O'Malley to light up. I'm not saying it'll be like totally easy. You know, song's not fragile. And, you know, he's given everyone a kind of tough fight. But nevertheless, like, you got to think with guys like O'Malley as well that they pick his fights strategically. Okay, the UFC does, because they want to promote him. And that's going to factor into the main event, too, with Paddy. But, like, just bear that in mind. Like, you know, anytime you hear a fight announced with Sean, assume they want him to win. You know, and, again, like, it would make more sense for him to fight Umar. And it would make more sense for Umar to fight him and not be fighting Figueiredo. But how did they pick? You know, how did they match make? They went with Yadong. So think about it. Main event. Paddy Pimblett, Justin Gaethje. And I'm sorry to my man, Rusty Shackelford, one of my main subscribers and commenters. I know he's got some money going on Gaethje, but I am picking Paddy. And again, like I just said, like, when the UFC really wants someone to be a champion and be a star, always be skeptical when they like book a fight with them. It reminds me of when Sean O'Malley got matched up with Peter Yan. Now, don't get me wrong, I picked Peter Yan. Like, everyone picked Peter Yan to beat Sean O'Malley back in the day. But I had this terrible feeling because I was like, this is such a step up and it seems like such a challenging matchup. But like, the fact that the UFC booked it and the fact that O'Malley took it tells me that they're all seeing something winnable here. And that just gave me like a rotten feeling. And dicey decision though it was, split decision though it was, some people cried robbery. Nevertheless, Sean won. You know what I mean? And you see the similar thing with Paddy, where it's like, from Ferguson onward, they're clearly picking matchups they think he can win, and they're against old guys with names. I did a whole video about this. But I think Paddy is going to win here. I think Gaethje, yes, he is very old. Yes, I think it's true what people have pointed out, that his power, while substantial, might be a little overrated because he doesn't have typically that sort of one-punch knockout ability. He just doesn't knock people out that quickly, hardly ever. You got to go back to Edson Barboza. And Paddy is insanely durable. He ate like a flush right hand when he was throwing a low kick. It was a flush right hand from Michael Chandler. He ate it, and he kind of taunted him afterwards. And I think Chandler, punch for punch, actually hits a little harder than Gaethje. So, like, I'm not loving Gaethje's chances of knocking him out. I think Gaethje needs him in the pocket. I think Paddy's bigger and longer. He's just known that he needs to stay out of the pocket against guys like that. That's how he handled Bobby Green. That's how he handled Michael Chandler. I don't think Gaethje's going to get a lot of opportunities. If he gets really close, I think Paddy's going to try to tie up with him. And if it goes to the ground, I think Gaethje's in a lot of trouble. And I get it. Paddy's not on the level of Khabib and Oliveira. Like, that's what Gaethje's been saying. That's what other people, that's what my man Rusty was saying. But, like, But Paddy's good. Like, I was thinking about it since I put out my video yesterday, kind of dissecting Paddy's style. And I think I finally found like the right way to describe Paddy, which is Paddy is basically Michael Chiesa if Chiesa were more durable, more willing to scrap, and didn't like dive into his opponent's submissions on occasion. Like, that's the kind of guy Paddy is. And I think that package like bodes well against Justin. Like, as much as Paddy might not be on Khabib's level, the shit I saw from Justin when he fought Khabib and when he fought Charles was worrying. Like like if you compare how well guys like McGregor and guys like Justin have done when fighting people like Khabib or Islam, in as far as just defending and surviving and not getting like instantly fucking subbed, there's a big gulf between that and what Justin did. And I picked Justin to beat Khabib. Like, I was like, hey, you know, he's this all-American wrestler. He's shown this great takedown defense. His footwork's coming along. He said all the right things. He said that Khabib gets his takedowns on the fence. He's got to stay off the fence. You know, if anyone's going to beat him, it's going to be him. That was what I was thinking at the time, and I didn't realize a few things, you know. But, like, one thing I especially did not realize is how insanely bad Justin Gaethje's jiu-jitsu is. Because he looked helpless on the fucking ground. He looked like he didn't know what he was doing. I don't want to be mean. He looked like a fucking white belt. Like, I got like Team Hammerhouse vibes. Like, that was when Mark Coleman and Kevin Randleman were training together back in the Pride days. And the stories go that, like, they just, like, didn't do jiu-jitsu. And surprise, surprise, they both got submitted a lot. It's like, you know, Kevin Randleman got submitted by Sakuraba, for Christ's sake. And that's, like, the vibe I get from Gaethje. Like, I almost wonder, like, does he just like, do MMA sparring and just, like, rely on his wrestling and scrambling a bunch and just not even work his jiu-jitsu? You know, I doubt it's quite that extreme, but that's kind of how it fucking looked. And again, while Paddy might not be on that level of Khabib, he might not be on that level of Charles Oliveira, he might not be like a world champion level jiu-jitsu threat. I think in MMA, he's a very, very serious jiu-jitsu threat. I think he's analogous to, like, Michael Chiesa. And if Michael Chiesa got on top of Justin Gaethje, I'd be fucking worried for Justin Gaethje. You know what I mean? So, with all these advantages on his side, I don't think Gaethje will reliably, like, knock him out. I don't think he'll reliably outpoint him for 5 rounds and avoid the ground. And I think if it gets to the ground, like, bad shit's going to happen to Justin. So, and I'm not too worried about Paddy's cardio. So, like, I just can't pick Justin. I like this fight was made for a reason. They went with him and not Arman for a reason. You know, they want Paddy to win. So I expect that to happen. And yeah, that's all I got. You know, looking forward to the fights.